Hi, this is Bill Overbey, and today's guest is an old friend of mine and yours, Gage Parker, who now lives in Lincoln, Nebraska. And Gage, what we're going to try to do here is pick your mind on what it was like in Shenandoah during the Great Depression when you were growing up. And anything that has to do with that, we'd be glad to hear you. In the meantime, I'll kind of ask you some questions once in a while, but in the meantime, we'll just let you ramble if you want to. Now, what did your father do at that time?
He started out, he came here to work for the economy, stock powder company.
Oh, yep.
Then he formed his own company, Parker Homestead. But then during the Depression, farmers didn't have any money to pay him, so he had to find something else. And so for temporarily, he wrote speeches in 1936 for Henry Field when he was running for United States Senator.
I'll be darned.
And he was always interested in politics. He never wanted to be a politician, but was interested in it. And that's what started Central Surveys. But that's another whole story that we can go into later.
Well, and you mentioned that the times got bad and he kind of had to switch his plans around. Did you notice, did your family feel any of the effects of the Depression?
Well, I suppose they did, but I was too young to really.
Young to think about it.
We always had food on the table and a place to live. And so I was, at that time, that's about all I was interested in.
Well, right. Typical childhood then.
Yeah.
Okay, you went to school in Shenandoah.
I did.
And what was it then, 9 months?
Yes.
And per term? And that
We
sort
went
of thing?
7 years at Central School, kindergarten through 6th grade, and 2 years at the junior high, which was the old parochial school, which is torn down now.
Yeah.
It's behind where the Christian church is located, and 4 years at high school here. I only went three and a half years because I quit at the middle of my senior year, went to college.
They didn't throw you out. You quit.
No, they tried to. But
Oh, okay. Was there a school bus?
no.
No buses. You
No
walked back and
We
forth,
walked,
I
we
assume?
walked home for lunch too, and
Yeah. How about clothing? What do you remember about
well,
the way things were?
I remember that the girls never wore slacks or shorts or things. They always had a dress on. I never in my whole life ever saw my mother in anything but a dress.
Sure.
That's the way she was raised.
Mm-hmm.
Now, working around the house, she may have a house dress on, but it was a dress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I never saw her in anything but a dress. She was always dressed up.
Did you wear overalls
Yes.
to school?
I don't think at school, but I would
You wore
put
them
them on
to
at
weekends
home
and
when I was
summer, huh?
tearing around, yeah.
How often did you get new clothes? Just whenever you needed them?
When I outgrow what I had, or they would wear out.
You
Probably
wore out or
outgrew them
outgrew it.
before
Yeah, I
they wore
understand.
out.
Dress up to go to church?
Yeah, well, yes.
And you wear a necktie?
Yes.
You tie
But
it?
somebody, no, I think probably that time my mother tied it for me.
Never slipped it over your head. Has the weather done that much changing since the 30s?
It was worse then than it is now. I remember drifts on Main Street were as high as your head.
That's one of the things that everybody we have talked to, that I've talked to, said, yeah, and the ones that lived in the country said they walked over the
Oh, yeah.
fence rows and everything
Oh,
because
yeah.
at least the winters
In the
were
winters.
worse. Summers,
And,
I suppose you were busy doing
the
something
summers,
else.
of course, there was no air conditioning.
Oh, yeah.
So my mother used to wet sheets down and put them on the kitchen floor, and we'd sleep on those
I'll
to
be
stay
damned.
to stay cool.
Yeah? Well, I haven't heard that one before. Okay, games. What did you play games when you were a kid?
Well, of course, we didn't have television or anything like that, so it was pretty much what you and your friends were doing. And fortunately, I lived in a neighborhood where there was a number of kids my age, so we would play. Game one play that I don't think they play anymore is Andy Over,
Oh, yes, I remember.
and we would do that, and then we would play. Oh,
Baseball, maybe?
not so much baseball,
Hmm.
but play a little football, and that's about it.
Um, the did you? I suppose, as we were saying a while ago, that you were just a kid, but did you notice anything that made you understand that money was tight and things were going? I mean, like neighbors taking in boarders. Or,
Well, now we had generally had a girl to help us at the house, but she was a farm girl, and for staying at our house, so she wouldn't have, then she would help around the house, and for that, well, she got room and board there, but
Worked.
that was
worked out a good
Yeah.
deal for everybody.
for
then.
everybody, yeah.
Yeah. The how'd you heat your house?
Well, it started out, I remember we had a coal furnace, and then we got gas later on, natural gas,
Mhm.
but, coal furnace.
Did how about Christmas? What do you remember about Christmas?
Well, Christmas was always a family affair, and we would spend Christmas either at my grandmother's house or at her sister's house, who was Mrs. Clovis of Clovis and Gage, and
Both of those were in Shenandoah.
both of those lived
Yeah.
in Shenandoah. In fact, the hardware furniture store Clovis and Gage was
I remember.
Gage was my grandfather, and Clovis was his brother-in-law, and so the two families would get together every Christmas, and at one place or the next, they'd trade back and forth, and that was our Christmas. But it was always in Shenandoah. We didn't go out of town.
What'd you get for Christmas? What did you want for Christmas?
Well, I wanted everything, but
All right.
well, I got. I remember one Christmas I got a trumpet, which drove my parents crazy.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know how to play it, but I was
But you
tooting on
played
it
it
anyway.
Yeah.
And I might have gotten a bicycle one Christmas or something like that.
Pretty good. And birthdays? Did you celebrate birthdays?
Not as much.
Did them out to
It would have friends
Had-
in. And,
had a cake?
oh, yeah, probably, yeah.
Of course. And ice cream or whatever.
Yeah.
When you were growing up, now that you look back on those days in Shenandoah, is there anything that really sticks in your mind that you feel like had a profound effect on your later life or your did anything impress
Well,
you?
I don't know. This didn't really have an effect on my life, but it was very interesting. At that time, we had two big seed houses, Earl May and Henry Field, and they all had auditoriums, and people would come in all over the country to see the entertainers there. So a stranger in town was not unusual. And we probably had there at one time more of the number one criminals of the country living here in Shenandoah than any other place. We didn't have much of a police force, but they kept Shenandoah clean. They wouldn't allow any, they didn't want an efficient police force, and they were close enough to Omaha and Lincoln and Kansas City and St. Joe and Des Moines that they could go out and do their, whatever the criminals do,
Yeah.
and come back and hold up in Shenandoah.
And wait for the next.
But we were safe there because they would not allow any skullduggery to go
Yeah.
along in Shenandoah because they didn't want
They didn't want the attention.
they didn't want the attention. But every once in a while the feds or somebody would raid some house and pick up somebody. But it was
And you know, I haven't heard that story before.
oh yeah,
And
it was
I've been
very
here a long
interesting.
time. Well, I'll be darned.
Now of course I couldn't recognize any of them, but they were. But strangers were not. You walk down the street, and if you see some stranger, you just speak to them and go on. You don't know who's that. You know, I don't know, probably somebody.
well, as you said, they were coming from all over.
all
the
over to
country
see the entertainers at the seed houses.
Sure. And, well, I guess they were still doing that when I came here. too,
Yeah.
A long time later. What else you can tell me about early days in Shenandoah? Your early days.
Well, of course, one of the big things was the jubilees. Both Mays and Fields would have jubilees. Mays had hamburgers and Fields had hot dogs.
Mm-hmm.
No, Mays would have pancakes, and Fields would have hot dogs. And
They were free?
free, oh yes,
Oh,
you'd stand in
yeah.
long lines. But I was real lucky. Gertrude May, Mrs. Earl May, was a classmate of my mother's in high school. And so, and the club that they belonged to called the Tri-H Club, which I have no idea what it stood for, and I'm not sure they knew either. Earl May would invite the Tri-H Club to come down for pancakes, and we didn't have to stand in line.
Oh,
We
you
got
got
right
to
in,
jump
yeah.
the line.
Boy,
Man.
that was really something.
Well, that, I can see that made an impression on
Oh yeah, because all these other folks, these common people, were standing in line waiting to get their
For a
their
block,
pancakes, but I didn't have to stand in line.
you. Anything else stick in your mind?
Well, I mentioned about what we played game. One of the most interesting games, we would play hide and seek.
Sure.
Now, Jim Bunce was my age. His father owned a funeral home.
Yeah.
We would hide in the empty caskets.
You and Jim and friends.
Our
huh?
friends, yeah.
Man.
And they'd go looking for us, and they might find us in one of the caskets.
That,
Empty ones?
that,
Well, at that time they were. No, they had us in them.
but you were still moving.
Yeah, I was still breathing.
Are these your things that were?
Oh, yeah, my daughter insisted that I bring all this stuff.
Boy, that was a real.
This is an old one. It had rubber tires at one time, but they wore out a long time ago. But no, I really played with that for years and years and years.
I'll bet. My gosh, it's big
And-
enough that you could still do it. huh?
Then that tank there, you'd wind up and it'd go and
They
that was, it would climb up over hills and things like that. So,
looked like kind of left over from.
and these are
World
some
War I.
relics from I just brought along. This is a coaster from at Clovis and Gage Hardware, Furniture, and Undertaking at that time put out. And this is a match case from
Oh, sure.
Hardware, Furniture, and Undertaking. And if you remember an undertaker here in town named Des Harding,
I do.
he was the last mortician to work for my grandfather in Clovis.
Yeah. is that right?
Yeah.
And he's,
And they had, at that time, a lot of furniture stores also did undertaking
yes,
because they had the furniture people could sit on, and they had the room.
yeah,
And so they had, generally had a mortician that worked for them. And I think Charlie Bunch started working for Cooper with the Cooper West Furniture.
as an undertaker.
And it's an undertaker, yes.
Uh-huh.
So that was,
Well, I know what you're talking about. When, down where I grew up in Missouri, that was the undertaker in every town.
Sure.
Was the furniture store.
furniture store, because they had the room, and they had plenty of seats there for people to sit on. Plenty of chairs.
Maybe.
Much more comfortable than they have now.
They, and I haven't seen a match thing like that for years.
Well,
I guess you can still buy it, wooden
I
matches,
don't know, you
but I haven't
can,
seen any.
yeah, well, the box would fit in there, and then matches would come out down
Sure.
here. But that's Clovis Gage Hardware, Furniture, and Undertaking. And they had this big store down on Sheridan, down here at the corner of Elm and Sheridan,
Oh, yeah,
across the street from where the new bank is now.
yes, yeah. I remember a sign on that building when I came to town.
The Clovis and Gage
Yeah.
Hardware and Furniture,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Hardware was half of it, about a quarter of it, and furniture was in the other three-quarters of it.
The streets paved when you
Brick.
were young.
It was,
Brick.
yeah, we didn't have any, it's out in the residential area, there might be a gravel road or unpaved, but most of the streets were paved with brick or, yeah.
When did they get city water here? You remember?
I don't remember, they always had it as far as I
As
knew,
far as you were concerned,
yeah.
you could turn the faucet.
Turned the faucet, we had water,
Yeah.
but I don't remember not having it,
You didn't have to pump it anyway.
not then, no.
Okay.
But,
Anything else you can think of? We got lots of time.
We got lots of, well, I made a few notes there. When my dad, after the election in 1936, when Roosevelt had us a landslide over Landon, and of course Henry Field lost out, so Dad had, it was interesting in, during that time, there was some young fellow from just out of graduate school at the University of Iowa. They did a survey in Iowa that said that Roosevelt was going to win the election. Well, my father was a staunch Republican. Well, that
He
can't
didn't
be
buy
right.
that.
So it wasn't hard to find interviewers then, so he hired a bunch of to go out and find out, check this out. Came back, and his results were exactly the same as this young fellow from the University of Iowa. And so he sent him out again with a new sample and new questionnaires. Came back the same way. But then he decided there was anything to this attitude survey business. It's all wrong. Well, when the final election came, it came out exactly the way that this fellow in the University of Iowa had it come out, and the way that my father's came out. Now, that was George Gallup.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I'll be darned. Isn't that something?
There were three nationwide pollsters from Iowa: George Gallup, Elmo Roper, who was a jeweler over in Creston, and my father. Roper did the survey for Fortune magazine. Now, Central Surveys, which is my father's company, are not as well known because we didn't publish our results. We did results for our client, and if he wanted them or she wanted them published, that it was up to them. But we did not publish, whereas Gallup and Roper published their
Yeah,
results.
and got lots of publicity
Oh,
in
yeah.
doing it, of course. Well, Central Surveys is still,
Still
Cool.
functioning, and they do a lot different. Of course, we did personal interviewing at that time. I was in high school, and I went to Green Bay, Wisconsin to interview. And I don't know where I was at this time, but one time I knocked on the door. We had to be the house on the next to the corner of each block, you know. So I don't know what the sample was. The door was open, but there was a screen there. And I knocked on the door, and I could hear somebody inside. And I said, hello? They said, hello? 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 It was a parrot, and I was trying to interview a parrot.
Did you interview him?
No, I finally gave up.
Are we fixed for time, girls?
I have a question
Okay, shoot.
about Gage. It's Jan back here. How about on the downtown with the Gavis? That was a good tie-in. Don't cut that out. The Clovis and Gage store, Saturday nights, how late do they have to work? Or
As long as there was customers.
really? So that could be,
It could be 9, it could be 10, it could be 11, it could be midnight.
you know,
Because
that's
as long as somebody customers were coming in, they were open.
yeah, it's far different
Yeah.
in a way than now.
Oh, yeah.
And do you remember what Main Street was like on Saturday nights?
Oh, yes. It was great to get downtown and sit in the car and watch the people go by.
And didn't people sit out on the front bumpers and just talk to people as they went past? Or was
Well,
it
there was a
different?
lot of conversation, but then you'd meet your friends down there. And now, one thing that back then, on Saturday afternoons, there was a nickel movie for kids at the Zenith Theater. And they would have a cowboy show and some shorts of comedy sometime. It might be a Laurel and Hardy or something like that. And but that was a nickel. And my folks would give me a dime to go there. And I'd stop on the way home to Woolworth's and buy a nickel toy and play with that all the way home. You gotta have it worn out by the time I got home, but
No popcorn?
they didn't serve there.
Didn't serve any food, huh? I'll be darned.
Just-
That was the Zenith, you
The
said.
Zenith Theater.
Where was that then on Main Street?
Well, the Zenith, and I think it was the State Theater, were right next to each other. And Holdridge owned that. Remember Bob Holdridge's
Yeah.
father
Right?
owned that. Now, the other theater was the Mayfair Theater, which was down in the auditorium at the Seat House down there.
KMA.
KMA's
yeah.
auditorium. And that was the other theater. So there were 3 theaters in town then.
But the Mayfair was kind of extravagant compared to the other two, wasn't it? As far as
Well, I don't know. It was
surroundings?
that in the State Theater. They did better class movies than the Zenith did. Zenith was more cowboys and regular odors, but that was about it.
Well, if they were just getting a nickel a kid, they had to buy some pretty cheap
Boy, I tell you, but the place would be packed
for Saturday afternoon.
Saturday afternoon,
Yes.
and it'd be packed with kids, noisy.
Kids answering the actors, I suppose.
Well, I don't know what
Oh,
we
they were.
did.
Of course, they weren't sound then, was there? You had to read them.
I think there was sound then.
Really?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not that old.
Gage is
I
a
am.
youngster. Tell me about the library. Do you remember going to the library?
Oh, sure. I was always a very staunch patron of the library.
That's good. That's
In
the right
fact-
thing to say, yeah.
In fact, I was on the library board, I think, for 24 years, 25 years until they
Yes, you
finally
were.
kicked me off. And,
Okay, well, I was asking when you were a kid, what you remember
Oh, when
about
I-
the library.
but I like the library, and I still like libraries. I go to the library over in Lincoln at least once a week
Yeah.
because I read an awful lot.
Yeah. Do you remember, and this is way before your time, but they had something they called the kindergarten room. Where would that have been in the library? And it was probably long gone by the time you came around.
No, I don't think so. There was a
Oh,
children's room
Yeah.
downstairs in the
okay.
library.
So where it is today?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I remember, this might have been after I was on the board, but anyway, got infested with termites.
Ooh,
And we had to do an awful lot of tearing out and fixing up and to get rid of the termites in there. Otherwise, the whole library would have probably collapsed.
That's right.
Right now, we're looking at, they'll cut this out, looking at redoing the bathrooms, because we really haven't done anything since you were on the board back in the 80s.
They needed to be done then.
Pardon?
They needed to be done then.
Well, they used to be under the front steps.
Yeah.
But
They certainly were.
that's when they moved them then to where they are now, those, out there in that little hallway?
I don't remember where they are now.
Yeah, well,
Well, way downstairs. They-
never mind, people, cut this out later. This is just my idle curiosity.
So,
How about any favorite teachers? Schools?
well, I got along fine with almost all my teachers. One thing about in Shenandoah back then, there weren't places like McDonald's and places like that to eat. There was a good hamburger place right behind the Sentinel building. They had hamburgers and beer there, but if you delivered papers for the Sentinel, you'd go in there and get hamburger. We thought they were the finest hamburgers in the world.
Probably were.
And the carriers would go in there and stock up, but they probably wouldn't let them in there now because they serve beer in there.
That place is long gone.
Oh, yeah. And another thing that we enjoyed in the summertime, and I noticed coming to town, it's still there, down here on Wabash, between Sheridan and Thomas, there's the old horse fountain.
Yes.
And
Yep.
it ran all the time. There's a big horse trough on one side, and people could.
Yep.
And in the summertime, that water and that it was cold, and there'd be people standing in line waiting to get a cold drink there in the summertime.
I was never allowed to drink out of that. It was a public fountain. Not that I went to the
I don't know
horse
why, but I managed to survive that. So
Yeah. Didn't kill you anyway.
no, but and I don't. If I'd known I was going to live this long, I was taking better care of myself.
Okay. Well, Gage, thank you. It's been fun. Can you think of
Well,
anything else?
I wanted to bring up one other thing.
Yeah.
Good boy.
I was fortunate enough to go on the honor flight to Washington, D.C. this year from Nebraska. And what got me was the people there. It wasn't the exhibits, oh, they were nice. And that World War II memorial is fantastic. But they would clap as we'd go by. And the firemen and rescue people, we had a bunch of them with us because these were all old men there. And they would clap as we'd go by. And I said, why are you doing that? And they'd, oh, thank you. They said, if it wasn't for you, talk about the World War II, we'd probably be speaking German and Japanese today. And that's the first time I had ever been thanked for being in the service. And so I got to wonder, why is that? And I think, this is my own opinion, it goes back to the Depression. They were all raised in the Depression. And jobs were hard to find. If you had a job, you did it as well as you could, and you did it until you finished it. Then you go to another job. And we carried that same philosophy over into the military. And if you had a job, you did it. You didn't complain about it. You just did what you were told to do and did it as well as you could. And you didn't expect any thanks for it. That was what you were supposed to do. And I think in Tom Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation, I got to thinking, why was that the greatest generation? And I think that was the reason, because they were raised during the Depression. I could be very wrong, but that's my own opinion.
Makes sense. Well, thank you, sir.
Well,
It's
thank
been
you,
good.
Bill. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.